Hi, I'm here today at the National School Board Association in Philadelphia with Sheriff Ron Hain with Kane County in Aurora, Illinois. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I see that you're speaking on the subject of school safety, and I thought I'd start with, schools have tried to do all they can, but are they really doing enough in your eyes?
Well, of course, when we talk about schools, you have to talk about the broad spectrum of them. There's the various size public schools,
Right.
There's private schools, and in my county alone, I have 9 different school districts.
Oh, boy.
And I would say about half are proactive in engaging with law enforcement in preparation for the worst possible scenario. And that's really what you have to do, because when the worst possible scenario occurs, everyone's going to revert to their level of training and preparation.
Right.
So by saying only half do enough to be prepared for that, no, I don't believe that everyone is proactively doing their part.
Schools, I guess, have a tendency not to reach out and connect with law enforcement until there's a problem.
Certainly.
How do the two come together? Do they come to you? Do you go to them?
Yeah, whether it's schools or whether it's the public in general, people are sometimes intimidated to engage with law enforcement.
Yeah.
And really it's incumbent upon us in law enforcement to make sure that at least we open that alleyway of communication. And that's where it starts. So if local schools are not seeing that from their police agency, by all means, please reach out, because the doors will be open. Law enforcement really depends on if you see something, say something. That model and that principle. And we fail at the end of the day in our jobs if we're not doing everything we can to engage, to receive information from our school districts.
I know you're doing all you can to help school districts, and certainly they need a lot of guidance, but what are some other things that they can do to help you and your staff be as efficient and effective as possible?
Yeah, really the top 3 things is we learned in a recent incident where we had an active shooter in Aurora, Illinois, that we can notify the public schools to lock down, but the public schools did not have contact information for private schools within their district. And of course, that's one more layer of work, right? That we're asking of the public schools. But that would do us a great deal of good in general public safety if they were networking with their private schools and we're able to pass along that information. So that's a key point for us. Also, identifying staff within the schools that will be very important for us to find in the event of a worst case situation. And one school district in my county refers to it as the key 5, okay, or 5 deep. So they have 5 staff at each school, 5 staff members that they know the entire security protocol. They know every access point of the school. They know access to the camera systems for the school. And that 5 deep model allows us to go direct and network with somebody as we're responding into an incident. And finally, really sharing platforms before the worst case scenario. So we didn't know who those 5 deep are. We would love to have access to their security camera systems. We would love to have key or keypad access to the schools. And of course, one pushback that we get from schools as well, we don't want police just at noon on a Friday tapping in to see what's going on in class. And so the way we've guided that is that only supervisory staff will have that access. And of course, schools can audit our viewing of that information in April.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. A lot of burdens placed on teachers, but your discussion about the 5D sounds like teachers are there, but they're at the bottom of the D's.
Yeah.
That deep.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
And of course, teachers should be focused on educating their children, right? They shouldn't have to worry about school security. But one of the school board officials at this conference put it great to me yesterday. Hey, policy and finance is what we set. So to me, it's really important to network with school board members from the law enforcement perspective to say, hey, you need to set this policy with your administrative staff, not your teachers, but your administrative staff, to know what their protocol is going to be.
Well, you had a study hall session, and it was the largest study hall session of any of the other sessions at the conference here.
Well, that's good to hear.
It really was. And people were standing outside, looking in, and I couldn't hear from where I was because I couldn't get in.
Okay.
But they had asked some questions of you, and you moved the mic around, and so give me a question that they asked that was pretty indicative of the concerns.
I don't know if it was indicative of their concerns, but the most telling question was, I feel like, this is from a school board member, I feel like our district calls police too much. Whether there's graffiti on the bathroom walls, or some kid broke a light outside the school or pulled the fire alarm, and I said, to my point earlier, you cannot call us enough. We heavily rely on public information. So I said, never, ever, please feel like you're leaning on law enforcement too much, because at the end of the day, that's our most important asset, is schools and school children, right? They're our future. So we will do everything that we can to protect their environment.
Well, they have on site the SRO, School Resource Officer. And I guess the SROs have their own organization, and there's training and, probably interviewing and selecting the right person based on cultural diversity and all those issues. How do you engage with the SRO? Who takes the lead in that?
So is that from a school perspective or from the law enforcement leadership perspective?
From law enforcement leadership perspective.
Yeah, because they're kind of an anomaly, right? The school resource officer.
You're not wearing the badge to do everything you can do.
They're much more officer friendly than anyone else on our force, and their primary role is to break down barriers between students and law enforcement, between educators and law enforcement. And that's important when we talk about layers of police response, and does every single school district know what the layer of their police response is? Because officer friendly, that school resource officer, is typically what they identify with when they're talking about drug use in school, or graffiti in the bathroom, or an active shooter situation. That one individual is going to pop into their minds as the person who's going to ultimately save the day for them. But that's not entirely accurate. So that school resource officer there is, of course, a frontline response and that community resource. But school districts should understand, again, with that 5 deep model of knowing who their key points are to network with police in the event of a worst case situation. They should also know that behind that school resource officer, there's going to be a police command response that's already tied in with that school resource officer. There's going to be a tactical response from the local SWAT team in the event of a worst case situation. And it's going to be very important for educators, administrators, and the students in the classrooms to understand what that tactical response is going to look like. Typically, the initial tactical response is going to be making some sort of violent entry into the school in an attempt to locate a violent aggressor. With that, there will be rescue teams to follow right after the first entry teams going after the shooter, and this can be a very traumatic situation that is becoming more and more common in our communities. And at least if people are exposed to some of the repetition of it, at least if they're exposed to the typical models that police will be responding with, it may provide an enhanced peace of mind as people sit in their classrooms.
Well, it seems like with social media, the students just are fearful. They can have a shooting in California, and you can be in Connecticut and hear about it within 10 minutes. And then social media, it spreads. So it seems like your job and that of the school districts are really tough.
Yes, social media is a beast that we have zero control over. It can be a good thing because you can get your message out there to a broader cast of people, but it can also be an absolute evil for us because it's very hard to control information and intelligence that we would like to get out there. And truth, right? Because like to your example, somebody could be saying there's an active shooter at a school in California, and somebody sitting in Connecticut going, well, I just saw on my post that somebody was making the same threats here, and I bet it's going to happen in my school at the same time. So it's really important that we have our own aggressive layers of social media and law enforcement to counteract some of that negativity. And it's been a focus of my very short term in office to expand our social media as much as possible for that purpose right there. We want to make sure that we can get the truth and our message out there.
Interesting.